Hi, this is Adrian Porter, and this is episode number 34 of Gen X Amplified, where I'm going to be chatting with Erik Deckers all about how you can use social media to invent or reinvent yourself. Really good stuff. So, are you ready? Let's do it.
Just you identify it, you claim it, and then you go out and do it and tell people this is what you do, even if it's something that you only do in evenings and on weekends to start.
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified, the podcast and the platform where we showcase the powerful generation of leaders and game changers between those magnificent millennials and those brilliant boomers, as I like to call them, Gen X or Gen Exceptionals. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing and sharing the word about this podcast. I really do appreciate it. So we're going to get right into this great, meaty conversation that I'm anticipating because my guest today is a professional writer, speaker, social media expert, and content marketing strategist. He is the president of Pro Blog Service, a content marketing agency. And he is also the author of quite a few books, including The Owned Media Doctrine and also the No BS Social Media. You can figure out what that means. And last but not least, one of my favorites, the book called Branding Yourself, How to Use Social Media to Invent or Reinvent Yourself, which I actually have sitting right here on my bookshelf. So without further ado, everyone, please welcome my guest, Mr. Erik Deckers. Erik, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing so well. Glad to have you on Gen X Amplified, another fellow Gen Xer, and you have a fascinating story, and I am excited about unpacking your latest book called Branding Yourself, which I actually do have, as I mentioned, and I bought the original version, I believe the first edition I bought it in 2011. So, and you and your co-author, Kyle, really did a magnificent job at writing that book. So today we're going to focus on you, your story, and we want to unpack this book because my audience definitely needs to hear about how to brand themselves.
Okay, great.
Awesome. So Erik, why don't you just start off just talking a little bit about your professional journey, how it's led you to your current career as an author and a writer specifically and a business owner. Then we'll transition from there and get into the meat of this latest edition of Branding Yourself.
Okay. So I've been in marketing in one sort or another for roughly 23, 24 years.
Okay.
And I was doing internet marketing back before we called it internet marketing. And I realized we were doing content marketing back before it was ever called content marketing in the late 90s and early 2000s. And because I'd been doing all this internet marketing as I changed jobs and I stayed on the internet and found that more people were going there and learning that this is the best way to reach people, it was a natural transition wherever I went from job to job, from selling poultry feeding equipment to selling software for blind people to becoming the crisis communication director for the Indiana State Department of Health, to selling direct mail. The internet was always part of what I did, and during my direct mail days in 2007, that's when social media started to come around.
Right.
And I paid attention to that, and I got on that, and I started doing it early on. And when I started doing this, I was one of the first people to do it. My co-author Kyle was one of the other ones, and at the time that I met him in 2007, he was like 24 years old.
Okay. And
so we started talking, started getting to know each other, and started working together. And at the same time, and this part is kind of important, kind of what led to the book. We had moved to Indianapolis, and I started working at the state health department almost immediately.
Okay.
And everything I ever did was within the agency. It's the largest state government agency in the state, and so everything I ever needed was there. Didn't need to talk to anybody in any other agencies. Speaking to somebody from the private sector was unspokenly frowned upon. They didn't want us to do that, but they never told us we couldn't. And so when I left there and started at the direct mail company, I didn't know anybody.
Okay.
I had to go to all these networking events, had a lot of one-on-one coffees with people, and just started meeting as many people as I could. And I was doing networking events 2 and 3 times a week and having coffee with people 3 to 5 times a week. So just meeting a lot of people, and within 3 years, I knew a couple thousand people around Indianapolis, right? I had at least met them and talked with them at some length. And so
just literally the 1,000 people, you talking about meeting them in person. This is not even a social media outreach.
Correct.
Okay, got
right.
it. Wow. Yes.
And I didn't necessarily have 1,000 coffee meetings, but I'm meeting
right.
people at these networking events and seeing them more than once and getting to know them there a few minutes at a time. And so I had helped Kyle write his Twitter Marketing for Dummies book in early 2009. And at the end of 2009, we said, hey, let's do another book. And we were trying to figure out, what do we want to do?
Okay.
And Kyle said, well, 3 years ago, when you didn't know anybody, and now when people talk about blogging, they talk about you, and everybody knows who you are, and you know hundreds and hundreds of people. Let's write a playbook to get the you from 3 years ago to where we are now, 2009, and talk about how to do that. And so we pitched the idea to Pearson, and they loved it, and we wrote how to do everything I had done with Twitter and blogging and Facebook and LinkedIn and meeting for coffee and writing for publications and speaking in public. We wrote that whole playbook on how to take 2007 me to, by the time we were done, 2010 me.
Wow.
And how can everybody else do that for themselves?
Wow, that's pretty interesting. You there were a lot of nuggets in there too. So the 2007 to 2010. So let's I want to take a step back quickly and go to something you said earlier. More so, you talking 2007 2010. So your trajectory with really embracing social and the positive aspects of that. Let's go back to 1990s and the 2000s when you first really looked at content marketing, because you said something interesting, because you coupled the phrase content marketing with that time period. And I remember that so well because I guess we're around the same age. We're both Gen Xers. And this was literally, Web 1.0. And this is early, man. And so the thought of content marketing at the time wasn't really in vogue. So how did you really jump on and kind of recognize the trend of using content as a way to tell your story and to really promote your brand without overselling? I guess that's what content marketing was or is. But if you can just unpack that a little bit and just talk about that period of time and how you really saw something that could add value.
Okay. So to me, content marketing is all about persuasion through education. And it's passive rather than active. I'm not going to interrupt your radio station or your TV show to show you what I need to show you. I'm going to wait for you to show up, and you're going to teach yourself. And by teaching yourself, you're going to persuade yourself that my product is the one that you need. Wow. And I thought that was a great approach for marketing back in the 1990s. And we were selling, I was working for my father-in-law at the time. At the poultry equipment marketing company. We sold that overseas, and we were also selling this reflective insulation that you can put in your house. And I decided we wanted to start selling that online, and so I set up a website geared toward homeowners, because the only people putting it in their houses at the time were the poultry farmers who were buying it and realizing what it did would buy a couple more rolls for their house and put it up. And it works by reflecting heat back outside in the summer and keeps heat inside in the winter better than fiberglass insulation. And so the only people who knew about it were the people who already knew about it. And so I created a website and started publishing a lot of content to it, and not just not just persuasive marketing messages, but educational messages. Here's what it does. Here's how it works. Here's where you can use it. Here's why it works in that place.
That's smart.
Here are the benefits.
Right.
And I just kept doing that over and over. And I would have pages on how to install the product, or why you should put it in your garage, or why you should put it in your attic, or why you should put it under your crawl space, or any number of places that we could put it. I had a page for it, and I had a good 500 to 700 words each page on why you needed it. Mm-hmm. And I would do things like I always made sure that we had a friendly, open, light writing style.
Okay.
Since I'm also a humor writer, that came naturally to me, and I was just using those same ideas and techniques. And I would do things in the like in the installation instructions. I would say, you can cut this with scissors, but don't use the good scissors. And I would get emails from people who they were laughing about that. They said, I was going to use the good scissors until I saw that.
Right.
Or, people would say, oh, I remember the good scissors. Mom had the good scissors and she never let us touch. So I was doing things to really make it personal and fun to people, but also to educate them. Mm-hmm. Bigger and bigger, and doing more and more of it. Mm-hmm. And to me, not coming from a marketing background in school, I was all self-taught. This seemed to be the natural and most fun way to do it. And this is how I wanted to do it. I'm a fun person. I like to laugh, and I like to teach and educate. And so I thought, this is how I'm going to do my marketing. Mm-hmm. And, then I find out 15 years later, that's what everybody's doing now. That's the big trend. And so I like to think I was doing it way early. But we saw our insulation sales go from less than 5% of our total revenue in 1998 to more than 50% of our total revenue in 2002. And it's all just because I was teaching people how to do it, and I was waiting for them to show up. But because I was doing it better than the competition, we were winning Google as well.
Oh, wow.
So that was huge. So winning all that search,
yeah,
and then our approach, we were selling a lot of insulation.
Wow. So quickly, so you mentioned a couple of things that traditionally your field of study in school was not marketing. What was it by chance?
Philosophy.
Philosophy. That's a big jump. I'm assuming you use some of those tenets.
It's a theoretical BS, and then I went into applied BS for a career.
I love it. So you said you created that initial website. Now this is obviously pre WordPress, or what? Did you actually learn?
Yes.
Taught yourself to code, or?
A little bit. I used the first website we built was in 1996, and we used Adobe PageMill, and it was awful. It was an ugly website. I actually went to archive.org and grabbed a screen grab of that old website, and it was just hideous. And then my brother-in-law, who became a web designer, built our next one.
Okay.
And he did it, and I could use it wasn't Dreamweaver. I forget. It was Adobe's. Yeah, it was Adobe Dreamweaver. Okay. I could build and change the website with that. And it was a WYSIWYG plug-in, drag and drop kind of device. I couldn't code for anything. I still can't.
That's okay. I can't either, but I don't claim to. Thank God for WordPress.
Yep. Oh, yeah. But
Wow.
I was able to build it, and just as long as I had a template to work with, I could create any page I needed.
So before we get into the book too, because that's why your story is so fascinating, and this is really key too. We're going to get into kind of best practices for mid-career professionals and leaders as far as really understanding your superpower, your talent, your skill in writing. So you mentioned, you were self-taught with respect to marketing discipline, and you found a way to use something that you were passionate about, which was writing. When did you initially, discovered your fancy for writing?
I was in college,
mm-hmm.
And I started working for the Ball State Daily News as a features reporter and a columnist. And I always thought everybody could write. I just figured nobody was interested in it. And it wasn't until much later that I discovered that's not the case at all. Mm-hmm. And I was actually pretty good, which was unusual. I was that guy who would start writing a paper for class at 8 in the evening and get done by 2 o'clock and turn it in and get an A. while everybody else had been working on it for a week or two and would, if they were lucky, get a B. And so when I figured that out, I realized this is something I wanted to start doing. And so I made sure that writing was always a part of my duties, whether it's marketing or doing the crisis communication and PR. Writing has always been a focus. And then 9 years ago, I got to become the owner of the agency that I own now, which is strictly a writing agency. All we do is write. I say we, it's me.
Right.
There used to be, but now it's me.
So this is a pro blog service, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, the ghostwriting. So is that primarily what you do? Is that it's a content marketing blog agency that you write blogs for? Is it other people and clients for their blogs, or how does it work?
Correct.
Okay.
They don't have the time or the resources to do it themselves, and so they turn to me, and I get it all done for them.
Wow, that's pretty cool. You know what? I mean, I try to write, or not try. I do write most of my stuff. I need to accelerate how much I do, but I guess I never really thought about, just like you would have ghostwriters when it comes to books. I guess there is a field. I mean, I guess I'm talking to one of the leaders in this field, but you didn't really think about it before, that a lot of the blog and articles you see, they may not have been authored by the personality that owns the blog, I guess.
Right. If the best rule of thumb is if the person who is the author is high up in the organization, and it's a large organization, chances are they didn't write it.
That is true. That is true. It's just funny. One of another gentleman that I enjoy his work, Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm sure you've heard of that name.
Oh yeah.
He's very candid about he hates writing, that he can't read it, so he hires a ghostwriter for all of his famous best-selling books. Which, the principles come from him, so I don't mind. But he's pretty candid when it comes to that.
Oh yeah, and I've noticed his ghostwriter captures his voice perfectly. He or she, and I can't remember who it is.
Right.
I think sits with a recorder and Gary talks, and they write it all down.
Right.
Just correct for grammar.
Right.
That's kind of what you get.
Yeah, definitely for the grammar. So going through this journey, so this is great. Self-taught. You noticed your passion for writing. You not only noticed it, but you noticed that it adds value, and it was something that changed the nature and trajectory of your business that you were in at the time. You and Kyle, who you met, I believe, in 2007. Kyle Lacy, is that how you pronounce his name? Kyle P. Lacy.
Yes.
I remember that from the book because of the Twitter handle. First, I honestly, when I first read it, I swear, and I'm being honest, I would call him Kyle Placey until I have to go back and look at the cover.
A lot of people did.
And then I'm like, wait a minute, his name is on the cover, but you guys actually did a little joke about that in the book. But anyway, you and Kyle, you guys wrote, you co-wrote Twitter Marketing for Dummies, and we're talking 2009, correct?
Yes.
So this is early Twitter. This is Jack and those guys really just initiating, the social media platform. It's interesting to see the state of it's in now, which I'm a fan of Twitter, but I hope these guys do really well. But I know that it's going through a couple of challenges, but I do see the true value of Twitter currently. But you guys wrote this book, and then Kyle and yourself, really looked at, and Kyle urging you on, hey, let's really expand the case study of your trajectory from 2007 to 2010, and this book, Branding Yourself. So I will say that the personal branding space, 2010, 2011, that was pretty much, I believe, kind of the peak. And that's when I noticed the book on the bookshelf, because at the time I was looking at how, I'm a marketer by trade. I'm a marketer professionally in school, and I love storytelling. But, you can market other companies, but sometimes you don't pay attention to marketing yourself. And so I wanted some additional content. And so I saw your book, but I swear, Branding Yourself, and we're going to get into this latest edition. I must commend you guys, because it transcends theory. This is a worker bee actionable doctrine, as I call it. And I'm assuming that was your intent, you and Kyle's intent, correct?
Right. Because the next book, No BS Social Media, that I wrote with Jason Falls, that we geared more toward the executive, and so we barely talked strategy.
Got
Or,
it.
I'm sorry, not strategy, but tactics.
Right.
There were no steps on you need to sign up for Twitter. It was only here's the cool stuff that Twitter can do. So you need to ask somebody to get it done for you. And with branding yourself, it's for you and me to say get on Twitter, do these 5 things.
Right. Well, that's great. So branding yourself, how to use social media to invent or reinvent yourself. So the first edition came out officially what year?
2010.
2010. And then you updated it for a second edition. And what year was that? That was the one with the apples on the cover, right? The apple, the one.
Yes.
The branding apples.
Yeah, the apples and orange. It's my book. I should know. I can't remember. I think it's all oranges and a green apple, or it's all green apples and an orange.
At the end of the day, how do you stand out? Basically, one color doesn't match the other, right? So branding yourself,
and I love the metaphor of the image comparing apples to oranges. You want to be the other, whatever was on the cover. I think it was all green apples, and you wanted to be the orange. You wanted to be that special one that stood out from everybody else.
That's a great analogy too, and that's what the premise is of reinventing yourself and using social media. So the book itself, as I mentioned, it is a very great actionable how-to manual for people that are looking to transition their career. As the subtitle says, reinvent yourself. A lot of people that listen to this show, and this part of what I'm really passionate about as far as my personal movement of really helping Gen Xers really unlock their unique superpower, whether it's to transition upwards in their current job or even start their own business. This book, I think, has a lot of great nuggets. And so when you and Kyle decided to use kind of the action plan that you took to invent yourself, let me ask you first, this is a great how-to manual, but did you see any challenges at the time to have a book so heavily focused on social media platforms that change consistently? And what was your thought going into crafting this?
The answer is no, because we didn't know any better. We knew that things would change, and we knew that people were going to ding us on that. We had already heard it from other people. Why can you write a book on SEO if SEO is changing all the time? And so we made sure to stay away from a lot of specifics if we could help it.
Okay.
If we couldn't help it, we had to, like mentioning certain products.
Right.
We had to mention them. Use these things to use Twitter, like Twirl and TweetDeck and
right.
I forget what they were, but like between the second and third edition, I realized how much of that we had not done, or
right.
how much we had mentioned all these things, because we had like 3 or 4 pages of Twitter tools you could use, and in the third edition, it was like, here are 3 Twitter tools,
right,
instead of 3 or 4 pages.
Right.
And so I even mentioned that in the book. I said, between the second and third edition, we lost so many of these tools. So if you're reading this 5 years from now, and these tools aren't around, there will be other tools. Apply these same principles, and they will still fit. So, it's still Twitter, and all of the tools we try to focus on basic principles of communicate, provide value, build relationships, be trustworthy, and those principles will apply 100 years from now, when Facebook and Twitter are gone and they've been replaced by something else. Still, provide value, build relationships that will all still be important to people. So every edition we've tried to focus more on that, less on specifics that will change in a week.
Well, that's a great approach. And I know that, so with the book itself and just looking at the outline, the initial approach, the first few pages or so, you don't just dive right into the tactics of the platforms. I think that's really key and critical. You first explain the premise of personal branding and self-promotion and the why. Like, why should you personal brand? Do you want to? And what goes into that, and understanding your unique purpose and who you are as a person and your passion. I think that was really important. That's one of the key elements of the book that initially, even in the first edition, which still applied, that really that I navigated towards, because when I opened the book, I was at that stage where at first I need to question, well, why do I want to reinvent myself? Or who am I? Like, if I want to brand myself, first of all, what does that mean? Then you understand the why and the how, and the what, then you get into the how. So I love the way you and Kyle framed the book. First, all about understanding and defining personal branding, the 5 universal objectives of personal branding, discovering your passion being 1, 2, be bold. Number 3, tell your story, which I love. 4, create relationships. And then 5, it's all about hitting the ground and taking action, which I really like that approach. And then you get into the specific tactics. And I will encourage anyone to really, that's looking to reinvent themselves, to grab this book, because it gives you a lot of the tools and tactics. So speaking of tools and tactics, let's talk a little bit about some of these platforms. So you're in the book, the 3rd edition comes out late last year or the beginning of this year. I can't remember. When was the published date?
Late last year.
Late last year. Got it.
It was the end of October.
Okay, the end of October. So thinking about the power of these tools, what is actually, Eric, what would you say is your favorite social platform? If you could pick one, or it's hard, like pick one of your kids. That's probably a hard question to answer. Maybe.
I like Twitter the best.
Okay.
Not so much what it's become, but it's more a sentimental favorite because that's kind of where I got my start, and I noticed that Twitter has helped me improve my own writing.
Okay.
As a humor writer, being able to set up a joke and get a punchline in there in 140 characters was valuable to a lot of the work I did. So it really just taught me to tighten my writing. I loved that that free and open discussion that it was in the beginning, where I would be connected with a couple thousand people, mostly in Indiana. And primarily in Indianapolis. And I would say, hey, I'm going to BW3's for lunch. Does anyone want to join me? And 4 people would show up, and 2 of them I had never met.
Wow.
Other than we were connected online. And so I loved that free spirit connection that we saw in those late aughts, 2009, 2010.
Right.
And so even now it's still because I use it the way I want to, not the way a lot of other people do, which is as a broadcast tool.
Right.
I still use it to communicate and talk. I still get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Just talking with people, asking and answering questions, sharing interesting articles. So it's still my favorite. I'm not so much a fan of Facebook, and I wouldn't use it at all. But I have a couple of clients where I need to be on it for them. So,
oh, wow. So why aren't you a fan of Facebook?
Just because this is where everybody goes to be angry now, and they all want to shout at each other, and that my side is right, your side is wrong, and here's proof, and so it's especially after the election,
right?
But even during the previous election, it was getting nasty, and then this last election was just terrible,
right? And
so I trimmed my friend list and really don't spend as much time on there as I used to.
Yeah, it's interesting. Facebook, that's the challenge. I mean, I admire, obviously, the platform is a behemoth when it comes to just being this huge media company, but Zuckerberg would call it a tech company, not a media company. One would argue it's a media or both. But yeah, you make a great point. I mean, a lot of the narrative and the chatter has gotten very unproductive at times. And I think, now with a lot of the challenges that the company has faced, with respect, like you said, to this last election and data breaching, I think it will find its way. But a lot of people, a lot of friends that I have, they've also, kind of trimmed their activity on Facebook because it's just become this playground of vitriol, and there's positives. Obviously, there's a lot of connections you can do with your family and friends if people would use it for certain benefits. But yeah, that's a very interesting point. And also with Twitter, you mentioned Twitter. I will say too that, well, before I ask this, I'm curious to get your feedback on the increase at 280 as far as a character limit. What's your thought on that? Because you actually specifically said, which I thought was a great point, that the 140 limit kind of challenged you to really communicate in story with brevity. But now, since they increased, what's your thought on that change?
It's doubly maddening, not only for the reason that you said, but because it happened right after the book was printed. So all of our references are to 140 characters. We had tips at the end of each chapter on, here's blogging tips in 140 characters, and here's Facebook tips in 140 characters.
Right.
And they went and changed it. It's almost like they did it on purpose.
They did it on purpose.
Screw you, Twitter.
Just tell them to read the page twice. Just read it again. Just read it twice.
Well, and I still try to keep it shorter than 280.
Right.
I mean, 280, it feels like half a page now.
Mm-hmm.
And so just my personal goal, and maybe it's just me being a little curmudgeonly, but I try to keep it still close to 140 if I can, just for the challenge. Mm-hmm. But I know when I'm delivering client messages, it's better to have that 280 because I can give a little more explanation. I can throw in a couple more hashtags.
Right.
So it's good and bad. I liked the challenge of 140 characters.
Right.
And so this to me feels a little lazy.
Well, yeah, and I've gotten more active on Twitter recently too, just as I've focused a little bit more on just kind of driving home and really promoting my brand as being someone who's passionate about helping our generation and really amplify kind of our overlooked generation and really unlock the virtues of it. And what I've done, and you made this a point as far as being, as opposed to being a broadcast medium, as being more so of a platform to engage. And that's true. I think a lot of people, and I myself included at times, more so before, have been very guilty of just using it just to add a couple of bit.ly links and pre-schedule and just pump out articles and content, which is fine. But if that's all you want to do, you're really missing the true value of the platform. So what I've done recently in the past year or so is I literally have gotten in and used it more so as a listening device or tool, a platform, to see what the narrative is around hashtags or subject matters that I'm interested in, and then just diving into the conversation. I mean, literally like listening, watching, tweeting people, responding, replying to people I don't know. And then from that activity, I've gotten additional followers. I've gotten business. It's just because I think that's the magic that Twitter has versus the other platforms, because you can really get a sense of what's going on in real time, unlike any other platform. And I think that's its genius. And that's why I hope that the company will really just triple down on that virtue of the platform, which I believe they started to do with their previous campaign of, see what's happening and really build it out as more of a real-time platform. But I agree with you that if you use it more so to engage as opposed to broadcast, you can see great value from that.
Right. And that's and you talk about a little bit about the kind of sharing that you should be doing versus what a lot of people do, and especially book authors. I find book authors to do this a lot, and I can always spot them. They've got 260,000 followers, and they're following another 260,000 people, and they've written 1,200 tweets, and that just doesn't happen. Unless you're one of the Chris's, Hemsworth or Pratt or whatever, and you go on Jimmy Fallon and you say, "Hey, I'm on Twitter." That's when you're going to get 260,000 followers overnight, without saying anything. But everybody else, I've got 18,000 followers, and I've written over 60,000 tweets, and so I don't go on these big Twitter hunt campaigns and try to add thousands of people at one time. I've come by these people over 10, 11 years. So the other thing that I always encourage people to do is to A, have conversations, but B, if you're going to share stuff, if you're going to say, hey, read this article or read this book, make sure it's somebody else's. I should be promoting, Adrian, I should be promoting your stuff and your podcast and the things that you do before I ever share my stuff. And I should be doing that roughly 9 times out of 10. I should be curating and sharing what other people are doing, so I can say, hey, look what Adrian's doing. Hey, look at what Susan's doing. And telling my people, check out all these other people. And then one time I get to go, oh, and I did this.
Wow.
And so I think that if we have that spirit of giving and sharing, not only does it show the people that we're sharing, that we care about them, but it also shows our followers that, hey, I'm not selfish and greedy. I actually want you to get some good information that's helpful to you. So I see a lot of book authors who are always buy my book, buy my book, buy my book.
Right.
And they're not getting any traction because there's so many people that they're following and are following them back. They don't pay attention. They might as well be talking to an empty room, but also they don't have that spirit of giving. And so there's no trust that has been built up between the author and his followers. So they don't want to buy the book. They don't trust the person.
See, that's very interesting. So, like, the book is titled Branding Yourself, but yet you just hit on some key points that I think a lot of people struggle with when it comes to self-promotion. Because those two things, self-promotion, branding yourself, but also giving and sharing, those things do not have to battle each other, to your point. So you're saying that the best way to create and promote a very important and brand that will attract is to actually do what people may think is the opposite of promoting other people's stuff, because there's more. I guess you was the key word that you said. You will gain more trust in your audience if you do that, right?
Yep. Yes, and we talk about this quite a bit in chapter 12. If you've heard of BNI, Business Networking International, one of Kyle's and my mentors owns the whole Indiana franchise for BNI. Okay. A woman named Hazel Walker, and she has written a few books with Ivan Meisner, who is the founder of BNI. And BNI practices what's called giver's gain. Okay. Which means if you give, you will get, but you don't give to get. Wow. You just give, and the getting will happen. And so, think of it this way. If I introduce two people who can do good things for each other, like I just introduced two friends of mine who didn't know each other. They're both guitar players, and the one guy wants to play in a band that the other guy works in. And so I make this introduction. Or I know somebody who is organizing a conference and they need speakers, and I introduce them to somebody who wants to speak on a particular topic at that conference. So I give that introduction to them. That's the give. But I don't expect anything in return. Okay. So if the one guy gets to play in the other guy's band, or if that one speaker gets to speak at the conference, they don't owe me something later. But, so I'm not going to keep track of favors. I'm not going to remind them, hey, you owe me something for this. That's very off-putting to people. It's very kind of stingy and mean, and people don't respond to that. But rather, I make all these introductions. I help other people get what they want first. And as I build the reputation of being that giving person, all of that comes back to me. You can call it karma, you can call it blessings, you can call it the universe smiling down on you, whatever you want to call it. All of that giving energy comes back to me, maybe because the person who organized the conference recognized I did something for them, and they tell somebody else about me, and that person asks me to do something for them. Or maybe this musician who gets to play in the band goes on and does another thing, and the generosity pays forward and still ends up coming back to me some other way. And I've been doing this for long enough that I've seen introductions and I've seen gives. I don't like calling it that, but for whatever else we want to call it, those gives have come back to me 6-8 years later. Wow. Completely out of the blue, and not from the person who helped, who I helped, but rather from a second or third connection from that person. Wow. That's thinking in the long game, and not even, I shouldn't say game, because like to your point, you're not doing it to get something back.
intuitively just want to give. And you're right that you guys did talk about that in the book, and the giver's gain. I never heard of that phrase, but what you and Kyle did right, and you did say that it's not about you. That is the most important rule of networking. You're not networking to help you. You're networking to help the other person. That was literally from the book. And I think a lot of people should embrace that. That's a great point. And it, again, is not always the initial thought, and it's kind of counterintuitive to some people, but you just triple down on personal examples and case studies of how you recognize and reap rewards from just thinking in this day and age, the old adage, the golden rule, provide value to others first, and then intuitively your brand will be more promoted, and you'll have a better, stronger brand. There are a lot of tactics and platforms you guys go through. So you go through all of them in the book, like the LinkedIn's, Facebook, Twitter's. You even talked about some of the non-social media or social network platforms that are really advantageous, such as blogging. You talk about podcasting, video, speaking. There are a lot of tools here. What would you say is, and again, I probably know your answer, but what would you say, how should someone approach if they're sitting, struggling? Okay, I want to brand myself. I want to build my platform. Where should I start first? Everyone's talking about video now. Should I get in front of a camera, get me a webcam and start pumping out video? Should I write? Should I podcast? Well, how would you approach someone who's asking for that type of counsel?
The first thing I always tell people is to start a blog.
Wow.
And the reason for that is because that's going to be the hub. Think of all your personal branding efforts as a wheel. Mm-hmm. And in fact, we call this the spoken hub approach.
Okay.
So you got your hub in the center. You got all the spokes that lead out from the hub. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to have a blog, and you're going to set it up on WordPress.com is a good free option, but they have some paid upgrades.
Okay.
Or you can go to GoDaddy, for example, and pay a monthly fee to host a WordPress blog. But either way, I like WordPress the best. And then you're just going to start putting content on there. And the reason for that, instead of Facebook or LinkedIn, is because you don't own Facebook or LinkedIn. And if they decide that they want to change their content publication policy mm-hmm. and delete all your stuff, you have lost it. It's all gone. Never build on rented land. Mm. And so if you own the blog, then you own the content. And unless WordPress or GoDaddy shuts down, and they'll tell you if they're going to, mm-hmm. unless they shut down completely, your stuff is safe. Mm. It's more safe. The most safe thing is if you have a server in your house or in your office and you put WordPress on that and you become a computer network expert, and you can keep it up yourself. Nobody wants to do that, but that's the best method. The second best is GoDaddy or WordPress.com, and then just produce good content. Mm. The next thing you want to do is we call it fish where the fish are.
Okay.
And so if you want to work in the B2B world, you want to have a business that sells to other businesses, or you want to work for those companies that sell to other businesses, then you should be on LinkedIn. And you should be sharing your content on LinkedIn. And you should connect with people who are in the industries that you want to work in, or the customers that you want to have. Join those groups on LinkedIn, and then share your great content from your blog.
Okay.
If you're on the B2C world, you sell to consumers, so restaurants and retail stores and car dealers, those are B2C companies. Those people are on Facebook.
Okay.
People who buy consumer stuff, you can market to them on Facebook. And so then again, your good content, you're sharing it on Facebook. Maybe you're doing a little advertising, or maybe you do have a video, or maybe you're just sharing this great article about, your real estate agent who says, here's why you should buy a house in my neighborhood, mm-hmm. or here's a review of the schools in this neighborhood. Whatever article that the Facebook people are going to want to read, you want to share with them. Mm. And then Twitter sort of falls in between. There are people who use Twitter for personal and consumer stuff, and there are people who use Twitter for B2B and work stuff. And I find it's a happy medium between LinkedIn and Facebook where I can do both. I can share personal things, I can share humor stuff, but I can also share that day job content marketing stuff as well. And so those become the first 2 or 3 spokes of the hub. And then as you get good at that, then you will start branching out and podcasting or doing video podcast or, Pinterest and Instagram and things like that. If you've got a more visual approach, or maybe you've got a visual product like a house or like cars or, what have you.
Right.
So you're going to just kind of build from there and eventually, and you're not going to turn it into a big publishing empire where you're on 12 different tools. You want 3 or 4 that you're good at and that you spend all of your energy on. I personally focus my attention on LinkedIn, Twitter, and my blog for work, and I don't mess with anything else. I don't want to spread myself too thin, and I'm very, very good at Twitter and LinkedIn. So that's where my strength is, and that's where I need to be. But it's different for everybody. You have to look at where your potential audience is and spend all of your time and energy there.
Wow, that was a great outline. So number one, you said start with a blog or your hub. I like the wheel analogy with the hub and the spokes. So start with a blog, whether it's WordPress. Within that first, I guess, phase, most importantly, is produce good content. So you can start a blog, but you have to really understand what good content is. And number 2, which I love, is kind of in the middle, fish where the fish are. So you created this platform. Now go after who you said you should know who your target audience is. So B2B, you recommend LinkedIn. Would you say consultants or coaches or consultants will fall into that? If you are consultant for a company?
Yeah, they're B2B.
B2B, right. So LinkedIn for consultants, or if your audience are businesses, and then Facebook for more of a consumer target audience. You said Twitter is kind of in between. And then last but not least, is it once you built the ground on in those 2 phases, started a blog, fish where the fish are, and then you can possibly branch out to those other platforms like podcasting and video. But I love that you did really emphasize, and you ended on that, is really understand who you're trying to reach first. Because I think a lot of times people don't do that, Eric. They think about the platform first, and they see something that's in vogue, or Instagram engagement is so great and this is the hottest thing, or Snapchat, and they just want to just dive in.
Yep.
And then you ask them, well, who are you trying to reach? Well, my audience are baby boomers who are looking for financial advisory services, but I'm going to rock Snapchat. You will totally,
exactly.
You would be very, your business will not succeed. I doubt if the baby boomers snapping. So, but that, I'm glad you really mentioned the whole fish where the fish are, because a lot of people don't do that. That's a really key point.
Yeah, that's important.
So when we think about the premise of a lot of people, and I know that you've gone through that journey, I've gone through that journey, people that are kind of that mid-career Gen Xers who are looking to, they're approaching kind of that mid-phase, mid-career stage. And many of them are looking, well, I still need to kind of reinvent and personal develop myself and my brand. How would you say this book could be applicable to where they are and could help them in that journey of really defining who they are, and so they can become better leaders for the next generations, or become a better leader in their home, or start their own business and really understand what their brand is?
It comes down to, in sort of chapter 2, we talk about telling your brand a story. And for some people, that's pretty easy. It's like, well, I know what I want to do. I just have to figure out how to say it.
Right.
But for other people, it's, I don't know what I want to do. I don't want to do what I'm doing anymore. And I'm not sure what should come next. And so I always encourage people to think of the thing that you love to do the most and can make money at. If you happen to like, I don't know, knitting, that's great. But can you make money knitting? Possibly. But so you have to look at, is this a way to make a living?
Right.
Look at how much money you need, and will people pay that much money for that thing? And so for some people, if your hobby is contra dancing, You're not going to make a full-time living doing contra dancing, but there might be other options. So instead, find out what is that businessy type of skill that people want. Maybe it's the job you're doing now, and you think you hate your job, but it's the skill that you enjoy. Accountants may not like their job, but that's because of who they work for, not because they don't like accounting, I hope. And so can you leave the company and become an accountant somewhere else? Or maybe you want to change jobs. Maybe you are an accountant, but you like talking to people and you like going out and meeting new people. Well, maybe sales is the thing for you then. And so you need to switch careers. And so once you've defined that and identified the thing that you can make money at, then the next step is to just sort of declare it. And this is as much for you as it is for everybody else, but you kind of, we joke about it in the book, but I think I said something like, if you want to be a writer, put your hands up in the air and shout, "I am a writer." And now you are one. And then you have to then go build that identity as a writer, and not so much getting the tweed jacket with the leather patches and the big glasses and all the pencils in your ears and things like that. But rather you have to just start like we talked about with the blog and the LinkedIn and the Twitter and the Facebook, you have to start doing the thing that identifies you as that role. And so if you're going to be a writer, you have a blog and you write about things. You don't have to write about writing. So many writers do that. It's like, I'm going to show off my language and grammar skills, and they write about grammar issues, but so has every other writer with a blog, including me. But do the things that showcase your talent, and then go out and start telling people that's what you're doing. Go to networking events and say, I'm a writer, I'm a copywriter, and I do ghostwriting for other companies, or I'm an accountant and I help nonprofits with their monthly accounting, and so you become a traveling accountant for people, and just you identify it, you claim it, and then you go out and do it and tell people this is what you do, even if it's something that you only do in evenings and on weekends. To start, just get a couple of clients, see if it's something that you're able to do, and then just build it from there. The whole point of networking is to not only have people meet you and have those people know what you do, but they tell other people as well. I met this guy, he's an accountant. I know you run a nonprofit, do you want me to introduce you? And so those kinds of referrals start taking place, and then pretty soon you've built up your reputation and your practice to be that thing that you want to do. But it takes a lot of the branding work that we've talked about, and then it just takes that networking as well and making sure people know what it is that you do.
Well, make sure people know what you do, and that's what you did with, you understood your skill, and you know that you love to write, and you've written many books, and I think that is the key advice, is find something that you enjoy doing, whether it's writing, you said knitting was one, dancing, helping people. If you're an accountant, and I love what you said, just because you're in a job and you've been doing it for so many years, and many of, obviously, our generation, we have the experience at our back. So we have a lot of years of experience, but you may be unhappy at a vocation, but it may be more so about who you work for or the company, as opposed to you're not happy doing what you're doing. So I love that you said that. There's a lot of great nuggets in this book. Before we go, because I want to unpack, I could unpack this for like 3 hours. There is a question at the end that I ask all of my guests at the end of the show that I'm going to ask you, which we like to have a little fun. So are you ready, Erik?
Sure.
All right. So Erik, if there was a song that would play every time you enter a room or when you walk down the street that fits your story and the brand of Erik Deckers, what song would that be? What would it be your own personal theme song?
So I know a guy who, he's a professional speaker and trainer, and he actually does this. Whenever he's going to go on stage, he starts humming the theme to Rocky to himself. And so I get the question. It's like, what would I want whenever I enter the room?
Right.
It would. I've got two choices.
Okay.
One would just be my favorite song, just because it's a badass song, and that's "Kashmir" by Led Zeppelin.
Wow.
I would want that to play whenever I entered the room, and like everybody would hear it and get the deep bass and the guitar, and just it's so impressive. It's like the Ride of the Valkyries of the 20th century. It's just this impressive making entrance song.
Right. Well,
however, the brand song that I would have to pick is completely different.
Okay.
It's called The Typewriter Song by Leroy Anderson. And you've probably heard this.
Okay.
It's, in fact, if you Google The Typewriter Song, there are YouTube videos of a guy sitting at a typewriter with a symphony orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And the typewriter is a percussive instrument. And it's you hear it, clacking and hitting the little bell in time with the music. And once you hear it, you'll go, oh, I've heard that song. Yeah. But that's the more obvious personal branding song. So there's the one I would like. Mm-hmm. And then there's the one that everybody else would pick.
I love these choices. That's pretty interesting. Definitely the Cashmere. Yeah, that's a pretty cool song to walk in on. So next time I see you, you got to make sure you put that out on when you walk on stage, the Cashmere song. But the Typewriter Song is a very interesting choice as well. That's pretty cool. So Eric, this has been a great conversation. I tell you again, thank you and Kyle for writing the book, the first edition, and all the subsequent revisions. I picked up the book years ago. It was very instrumental in my growth and really understanding all the different tools. At the time, I was somewhat active on social, but not really. I mean, we're talking 2011. So this book really helped me. I'm a fan of branding, but when you have to take an introspective inventory and brand yourself, you do need guidance. So this book was a guide for me. And so I thank you and Kyle for doing that. Everyone listening in, if you are at that phase where you're trying to understand this social media landscape, but more importantly, how to attack positively these tools to brand yourself, to reinvent yourself at this stage, at this mid-career stage, I definitely advise you to pick up the book. Eric, I'm assuming you can find this book anywhere via Jeff Bezos' little company called Amazon or bookstores, correct?
Yes.
So branding yourself, how to use social media to invent or reinvent yourself. People, please pick this book up. This is definitely, again, an how-to manual. It's theory, it's strategy, but more importantly, there are a lot of action items. Eric, where can people, if they want to just keep in touch with you or learn more about you, where could they go?
I'm E. Deckers on Twitter.
Okay.
EDECKERS. If you want to read my humor blog, that's at erikdeckers.com. It's ERIK, Deckers.com. And then if you want to read my work blog and read what I say about content marketing, some personal branding, some grammar and language items, that's at problogservice.com. So just one service, problogservice.com.
Problogservice.com. Eric, it's been great. It's been awesome. Thank you so much. And it was great chatting with you.
Thank you. You too. I enjoyed it. And thanks for reading the book. I really appreciate hearing that story.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Definitely. Take care. That was Erik Deckers, co-author of Branding Yourself, How to Use Social Media to Invent or Reinvent Yourself. So thanks so much for listening to this episode. Now, if you want to find out more, to get the show notes or hear other episodes, you can go to genxamplified.com. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show through the Apple Podcast app or the Google Podcast app, or wherever you get your podcasts based on your mobile device. And while you're there, definitely please give us a rating and a review if you've enjoyed this content. Now, you can also check me out at adrianporter.com to get even more content, stay in touch via email, or learn more about my mission to help and empower Gen X professionals to maximize our impact at work, in business, and in life. Once again, I'm Adrian Porter, and you've been listening to Gen X Amplified. It's more than a podcast, it's a movement.